We don't want to scare people, but we do want people to think all the time. Sometimes you need people who can think outside the box when it comes to security. That's a major task for organisations like yours. It is even a bigger task for where I am in Leinster House in the Oireachtas. We need to realise that investment in support mechanisms is probably as important as any other operation that you carry out in your organisation.
When we talk about risk management, very often you can find a party that will take the responsibility of it, but not the accountability of it.
It's like most things in IT, we love the automation, but we really don't want to pay for it. When we take a machine into our hands, you have all of these hardware pieces, software pieces, security layers on top of that, end user applications, but at any level, there can be a risk unknown to you.
Senator Gerard Craughwell, as an independent, you were first elected in 2014 to the Senedd on the Cultural and Educational Panel, and were subsequently re-elected in 2016 and in 2020 to the Labour Panel. Looking back over the last decade, what has been your purpose or mission, and how has being an independent supported you in that mission?
Well, let's go back to 2014. My election on the Cultural and Education Panel was by way of a by-election. It wouldn't have been my chosen panel, although I had just stepped down as president of the Teachers' Union. So in 2016, the opportunity came to seek a nomination from a different cohort rather than education. And having been a former leader of a trade union, it placed me in a position where I could look for a nomination from the security forces and allow me to go back to my youth, if you want, where I served in the military. So I successfully got the nomination from the police, the armed forces, and at that time the financial trade union, who combined under a group called ICPSA. And that then allowed me to, if you want, set targets for myself in the area of defence and security, which were my primary concern. After the first 18 months in office, I realised we had serious problems in that area.
So understanding that that was you identified that there was a real issue, that kind of brings us to the core of our discussion today, which is around cybersecurity. And you've often highlighted that the function of cybersecurity right now is currently tucked away in the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, of all places. And you've argued that this is a fundamental mistake. So why do you say that, and how would you solve it?
Well, I think what we've got to do is we've got to come to why I decided to move further into the cybersecurity area. Initially, my concern was about the defence forces and the lack of defence capability within Ireland. But then, following the attack on the Health Service Executive, suddenly my interest was reawoken. I had been a signaller in the defence forces, so I had some knowledge, if you want, and I had taught IT for the best part of 23 years.
Yeah.
So I had some knowledge and some interest in the area, and I started to look at where we are in Ireland. And in a very short space of time, I became quite horrified by what I saw. Institutional Ireland, the state, had no real focus on cyber. We were caught on the hop. And the HSE was and should have been a lesson that changed the focus of cyber and all things cyber related in Ireland. And what bothered me was a year on, we still hadn't taken a very serious view of where cyber was in the world. And I said, somebody's got to start talking on this. So I started to bring people together in Leinster House, and we had around about 25 people contributed to the development of a single paragraph that defined a vision for cybersecurity in Ireland. It took 3 weeks to get the various interest groups to agree, but in the end we got an agreement. And since then, we've gone on and developed quite an extensive amount of work in the area of cyber and where we want to go in cyber. But you will be aware that many of your clients see cyber as something of a nuisance rather than something that they should be extremely concerned about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to touch on that example of the HSC. So you have proposed something that I actually quite like, which is a cyber czar inside various departments. So, but the idea there is that you're going to place a highly skilled cyber individual inside those departments, but they don't report to their line manager. They actually report over to the NCSC. And that way you actually have a collective of cyber incidences and cyber management and cyber philosophy distributed across essentially the government. Firstly, I mean, is that practical? Is there an opportunity for a pilot project, or is that being shelved as an idea?
Well, the idea, in my mind, is a practical idea. Let's look at the psychology, if you want, of government departments.
Yeah.
Government department is hit with a crisis, irrespective of what the crisis is. The tendency is to pull down the shutters, sort of control the environment within the organization, and only when the crisis has been managed or has passed, they start to talk about it. And it is my view, and I think you'll find that those you deal with in the commercial world or government, where a cyber attack has happened, the tendency is to cover. The tendency is to go silent. The tendency is to deny everything. And I felt that this simply wasn't good enough. So if we place somebody in a government department and we say you're now in charge of cyber and you're reporting to the Secretary General of the department,
yeah.
If there's an attack, the tendency will be to shut down and go silent until this situation is solved. Whereas what should actually happen is there should be reporting straight through to the NCSC. And this doesn't just apply to government departments, it applies to all businesses. If you were hit with a cyber attack, the quicker we can get the information into the NCSC and the quicker we can get that information out to the end users, the organisations, government, non-government, it doesn't really matter, the more likely we will reduce the number of hits in the country. Going silent solves nothing. It may save you a few blushes, but saving blushes is of no value.
So with that kind of architecture, do you think that the HSC attack could have potentially been limited or mitigated in its entirety with that kind of an architecture? Just kind of thinking back retrospectively.
I think when we look at the HSE and when we look at government departments in general, the technology tends to be slow to, if you want, reach the market equilibrium. The problem you'd have with the HSE, for example, it's a very flat network. So you don't have a hierarchical structure. You have suppliers, vendors, all sorts of people hooking into the HSE. And unless you lay a benchmark down that you must reach this level of technology, you cannot possibly expect to preserve your organization from an attack. Anecdotally, we're told that at that time, some of the machines that were hooking into the HSE were Windows 98, maybe even Windows NT, who knows? But the bottom line on it is, unless you can control the environment, you cannot protect yourself. Could we have saved the HSE? I think it would be very difficult. I think the person in charge of cyber in the HSE now is taking a different view. Walk into a hospital. Walk to any nursing station and look for the username and password. The security conscious people will have it taped under the keyboard. Those that are not security conscious will have it stuck on the side of the monitor. And that's unfortunately the truth.
I love that. Which kind of takes us into another area that you particularly enjoy, which is around the human firewall concept. So you famously used the Joey Duffy test, or the Joe Duffy test, which is basically, we shouldn't hear about national crises from a talk show host, right? We should be aware of the threats before they arrive, and we should be aware of the communication channels that we need to use when that threat arrives. So that kind of brings us to the human firewall concept, and where we have a culture in Ireland of proactive, informed citizens that understand their role in national cyber defense. I was thinking probably the Switzerland of cyber defense, kind of an analogy. Is that your vision?
Well, Switzerland, Estonia, you name it. Personally, what I believe we should have, working out of the NCSC, we should have a cyber ambassador who is employed full-time, engaging with organisations, explaining the need to get on board. Do remember, with NIS2 coming down the road very, very fast, board members run the risk of being struck off. Organisations run the risk of serious financial fines for failing to reach the standards required. So first and foremost, I think we need this cyber ambassador working throughout the country. But I also think that we need a few additional things. We need to start cyber education at 5th class national school. We need to have broadcasts on national TV, national radio, maybe once a fortnight, once every month. If you do it too often, it becomes a hymn that people stop listening to. Yeah. But and we don't want to shock people. We don't want people to be scared of cyber. We want them to be aware, and we want them to know that this is the function of every citizen in the state. Because if they hit me, the chances are they hit everybody I'm in contact with. So we need everybody to step up to the plate. But more importantly, we need people to take what I call civic responsibility. If I am hit, I was hit last week with a phishing email. And the first thing I did was I reported it straight to the IT department. And, I shouldn't be afraid. I speak about cyber in the Parliament.
I know, exactly.
So you would think, if I got hit with something, I better say nothing because it would ruin my reputation to think that I actually got caught. But no, we've got to be open. We've got to be honest. We've got to start telling people, the stupid phone call that looks for your card details. We all get caught at some stage. We're otherwise engaged. We're occupied on something else. We click on something inadvertently and suddenly we're gone. So let's be honest and let's be big about it and not be ashamed or afraid. But organisations have to change too. Organisations have to develop a culture where people who report attacks are actually rewarded rather than in some way punished.
Yeah, I do like the reward mechanism coming through. And I think that also comes down to training in terms of how you train individuals around cybersecurity, that being a whistleblower is actually not a problem in that sense. And there is actually a reward on the other side, not only keeping your business safe and keeping your employees employed because you avoided the cyber attack, essentially. As we pivot to, we pivot away from the ideas of GDPR as a piece of legislation that has been around since 2016. And we realized that although that legislation really supported our understanding in terms of what good data governance really looked like and maybe good processes around IT, it never fixed the fundamental problem of cybersecurity. And I think we saw that with the HSC as well, where they were very good potentially on the privacy side of things, but woeful on the side of cybersecurity side of things again. So with NIS2 and DORA, NIS2 being the cybersecurity bill in an Irish context, we're moving from best efforts over to strict legal mandates. So the question here is like, even a huge percentage of Irish businesses don't even have firewalls. Do you think that this legislation is actually going to take effect? Is it going to improve, or is it just going to be more red tape and higher costs of products on the other side?
I think from the point of view of, let's say, the larger SME sectors, they're going to view it as the benchmark they must reach. They're going to take it serious. The problem we have is when you start to go down to the lower employment organisations, 10, 20 employees, the Irish system, with respect to defence and security, has always been, sure, everybody loves the Irish. Aren't we the greatest football fans in the world? Don't we get welcomed into every country? Who in God's name would ever attack us? What about the HSE? That was a mistake. Didn't they give back the key to decrypt it? Sure. Everybody loves the Irish. No, they don't love the Irish. No, they don't love every computer user. The moment you put a mobile phone or a computer in your hand, you are at risk. And we have to get that message across. It's all very well taking a member of the board of directors and having him struck off forever because of a major cyber attack. Yeah. But what about Joe Bloggs, who's the security officer working in the organisation at night, who's surfing the web while he's got a half an hour to do? Or Mary Bloggs, who's the receptionist who was shopping for something or got this marvellous deal emailed into her that she just couldn't resist. Every single one of us at some stage in our lives fall for these stupid, highly stupid, but yet very convincing, I suppose, enticements that cause organisations to go down. What the 10 or 20 employee organisation has not yet come to realise is that a serious cyber attack within a nanosecond can put him or her out of business. And that's where we've got to focus. We don't want to scare people, but we do want people to think all the time, not just some of the time, all of the time. So I don't know, that's a major task for organisations like yours. It is even a bigger task for where I am in Leinster House in the Oireachtas. We have to get serious about security. We have to get serious about defence. And all of these things merge into one major institutional problem, if you want, for Ireland Inc. And that is, we all have to realise we are all the army, we are all the guards, we are all the people who defend the country.
I think that idea around the Swiss Army type narrative for Ireland when it comes to cyber and cyber protection, that it is all of our duties. And that's something potentially that idea of yours around the cyber ambassador could pick up. And it's literally everyone needs to be armed with these ideas in order to be able to protect ourselves. And the most important piece is that human firewall, which is around the anti-phishing, which was essentially the attack vector for the HSE as well. So yeah, it's quite a complicated piece, but moving on to something that is equally complicated, which is around critical infrastructure. So we've spoken a lot about server rooms, we've spoken about data, but our lights are kept on through operational technology, so OT. And so in our focus on data, have we potentially left our flanks open to attacks against our infrastructure, but thinking along the lines of hitting our water infrastructure, our electrical infrastructure? Is that something that keeps you up at night?
It certainly does. We have ignored OT really in this country. We have focused on data. For what little focus there has been, it has been on data and, if you want, the operational environment within an organisation. But the OT, if you're thinking about production, manufacturing, etc., we really haven't gotten down to that. And we really, again, are living on this borrowed sort of time where we think, no, but sure, how would they even find us? We're a small company manufacturing kitchens in Monaghan. How would they even know we're there? Have you got a web presence? If you have, we know where you are. Thank you very much. We'll find you. So the OT side is something that we need to wake up and sort of smell the coffee on it. I recall at one stage being in an educational institution and talking to the chief executive officer about an OT attack. And they had a mini production line which used to sort tiny little ball bearings into different colour groups and things like that. Yeah. And he just couldn't get it. So I actually put my finger down on the track that was moving the products. And the next thing, there were ball bearings everywhere. And he said, "Good God, man, what have you done?" I said, "Well, that's an OT attack for you." I said, "You're now out of business. Your entire production line is destroyed." And we need to wake up to that. But, when you talk about the infrastructure, we bought a server. We're delighted with the server. All our info is on it. Did you put a firewall in place? We don't need one of those, sure. That's wasted money. It's a box sitting there doing nothing. I recall putting in a server for a chap one time, And when he agreed, we used to do this for educational purposes with students. We'd bring them out and they'd put in a system. And we did this for a particular company in town. And the guy said, so where will this server yoke be? And I said, well, we'd probably put it in that cupboard over there. And he said, sure, nobody could sit in there, he said. And I said, but nobody needs to sit in there. The server will do its work in the background. He said, I won't be paying for anything that nobody will be working on. And it took quite some time to explain to him that this machine was going to do a huge amount of the work for him and for his staff. But his idea was if there wasn't somebody sitting beside it couldn't be any good. Similarly, when we look at the technology that's available today, firewalls, there are now boxes that sit between your ISP and your firewall that can examine data at the packet level. People don't quite get the notion of packets and what they are, but as packets are running through your system, to have a box that can analyze at the packet level and sandbox iffy incoming or outgoing data, that's hugely important. But it's a cost. And the cost is something that it's like most things in IT, we love the automation, but we really don't want to pay for it. And when it comes to the support mechanisms, we want somebody to support us, but do we really want somebody at the top end, somebody who really knows their stuff? Sure, John Murphy down the road is a great young fellow with computers. Let him come up and sort us out. Whereas we need to realise that investment in support mechanisms is probably as important as any other operation that you carry out in your organisation in order to see to it that the organisation survives.
Yeah. I think you kind of touched on that operational resilience piece. And if we kind of bring that back to a national level in terms of operational resilience, you've often talked about the subsea cables and the potential risks around that. So Ireland is the data hub for Europe, but we have significant gaps in our ability to actually monitor our waters, understand where those, or potentially who's looking at those undersea cables. So the thought process there is, have we ever looked at a scenario where there is a lights out, as in somebody, a bad actor, comes and disrupts those lines, not necessarily severing them, but essentially degrades them to such an extent that they become unusable. Now you'd have to hit multiple lines at the same time, but it's not outside the realms of possibility. So the question is there a national drill? Is that on somebody's radar? Is that a thought process, or is that a pie in the sky?
The problem, as I see it, is the cables have been compromised already. Bad actors, if there are bad actors out there, and we know there are,
yes.
They plan years in advance. They're not doing something on a whim. So we know that the cables, the undersea cables in the Irish economic zone have already been mapped. We know that. There is no secret to that. The next question is, are they secure? Well, the Irish state has no way of telling whether they're secure or not. We don't have the technology to see what's under the sea. And particularly when you're talking about the depths we're talking about, you need submarine technology to get down there. So I believe they have been compromised, maybe not all of them, but definitely some of them. You're correct in saying they don't have to be severed. In fact, you don't even have to stop the data coming through them if you can eavesdrop and take the data from them as it's coming through. You look at it, a couple of $1 trillion a day are transacted across the Atlantic. All you need is a tiny, tiny portion of that. And if you can get a tiny portion of that, it's the classic one, to draw an analogy here. I had a debit on my bank account of €3.18. And I couldn't figure out, where does €3.18? Don't mind, it's only €3. And then after a couple of months I looked and it's still going. Eventually I contacted the bank and I said, where's this going? And they said, it's a company in Seattle. And I said, well, definitely this was criminal activity. €3.18, but hey, it's chicken feed. But if you have 100,000 people paying €3.18, and
you'd probably be the only person that looks that closely at their bank statements as well. of the 100,000.
But you understand where I'm coming from. In exactly the same way, if you can pull data off the undersea cables, we have a serious problem. And the problem is that we in Ireland do not believe that we need to think about defence. And defence is every bit as important as the security aspect. So we need our 9 ships back at sea, not just one. We need our Air Force flying over those cables. One of the things that I had considered, and I spoke to a company in Shannon about it, they manufacture drone technology. We could have drones over those cables 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
We don't see the value of the investment right now, but we will. The problem is, will we have lost a significant amount of FDI by the time we wake up to the problem? That's my central problem.
Yeah. And of course, there will be an immediate knock as well. So there will be an immediate fallout of some description, and there will be a cost associated to that. But the long tail effect of that foreign direct investment that dries up will potentially lead to massive catastrophic issues.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you look at our income from FDI, 10 companies are virtually keeping this country, not just keeping it going, but making it one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
Yeah.
And for some reason or other, we like to contract out risk. We don't like to take risk on board ourselves. It's much easier if we can contract it out. And I have no difficulty with the contracting out of risk. But if we're going to do that, let's have oversight of the contractor, see what they're doing. You know in your business that your clients are very happy to pay what they pay you, providing they can satisfy themselves that the job you're doing is the job they need. And I think that's what we've got to do in this country.
When we talk about risk management, very often you can find a party that will take the responsibility of it, but not the accountability of it. And that's really the piece that I think potentially from a government perspective they haven't taken on board, is they're still accountable.
Yeah, you can, from the point of view, a lot of the services in this country are now contracted out. And you can contract out the risk to a certain degree, but you cannot contract out the accountability when something goes wrong. To use an analogy there, we contracted out search and rescue services, helicopter services. No difficulty, they do a great job and everything. But when Rescue 116 crashed off the west coast of Ireland, accountability came straight back to the Irish Department of Transport and the Irish Aviation Authority. So you can't divest yourself of the responsibility at the end of the day.
Yeah. And coming back to the military veteran angle and education. So really as a former president of the Teachers Union, my feeling or the sense that I have is that you have a good view of the pipeline, the talent pipeline. So as an advocate for the Green Flags school initiatives, can you maybe expand a little bit more about this? Because I feel that it talks a lot to the initial points you were making around digital hygiene as a basic life skill for the next generation. Absolutely.
It's rather amusing. Some time ago, there's a beautiful little book written by one of the academic staff in Limerick for children, national school children, on cybersecurity. And I was talking to my 10-year-old niece, and I said to her, I got this wonderful book on cybersecurity. I'm going to give it to your mum to read, and if she thinks it's okay, you can have it. And she looked at me and she said, oh, Grandad, she said, I've been studying cybersecurity for a year now. And her school is clearly out there at the cutting edge. But you mentioned the green flag.
Yeah.
It's my view that what we should do, and hopefully we will find a sponsor at some stage to do this, to have the IT flag at every national school in the country. And that means to have the IT flag, the kids must come out with basic IT literacy skills, but also must have cyber and now artificial intelligence, a basic understanding of that under their belt coming out of national school.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my eldest now out of school and my youngest is almost finishing school, and not one of them has really had any kind of interaction from an AI perspective in terms of the best kinds of ways to use AI. Just even basic prompt engineering is completely missing from schools. But just kind of touching back on the military piece, the military veteran angle, as a veteran yourself from two separate armies, Do you think that's potentially a gold mine for attracting the next line of cyber defense specialists, literally taking them from physical defense security mindset and then bringing them into the digital cybersecurity mindset? Is there an opportunity in there? Have you been exploring it?
Yeah, we've been looking at it, and basically it's down to funding at the end of the day. As veterans are leaving the forces, irrespective of what force they're leaving, we have former British veterans, former Irish veterans, former US veterans in this country. I believe everybody leaving the service should be offered an opportunity to get involved in cyber, because they already have a defence and security type aptitude. But we came up with a notion of a 3-tier cyber defence in Ireland. And the first was your standard companies that are providing the security for your organisation. You have a fairly large organisation like the HSE gets a hit as massive as it got. You then need to bring in a second and possibly third tier. So the second tier, I believe most companies who have cyber professionals working with them would be willing to lend an employee for a day, 2, 3 days. But then we came up, the third tier was what we call the cyber fianna. And the cyber fianna would be those veterans you're talking about who knew what they were looking at, could possibly reconfigure a machine or something like that.
Yes.
But they're probably men in their late 50s, early 60s, but they would be useful for that third tier. To come in and do what you might call the grunt work. So the cyber professional can work at the top level, but you have people you can trust down the next level. And this is where the national training scheme should come in. Former police, former military, former prison service, former fire service, any of them that were in service who knew what discipline was about, who can be, it's not, let's face it, it's not rocket science to install software on a machine, bring a machine back up to working level, and then hand it over to somebody who can do all the security bits and bobs. I also have a bit of a concern that sometimes we rely too much on shrink-wrapped solutions. Sometimes you need people who can think outside the box when it comes to security. So I think that's important too.
I think if we also just think about data sovereignty, software sovereignty, and potentially even chip sovereignty, that ability to think out of the box is going to become more and more important, because we're going to have to bring a lot of that technology that we've relied on our partners back to Europe, especially around the software, especially around AI, especially around technology. Is that something that the Irish government is actively thinking about?
I don't think so. I mean, when you talk about chip technology, I mean, we're down at the ones and zeros now. We're down to the most basic element of a computer. And recently, speaking to some people in Taiwan, they had some suspicions about chips they were importing. And when they researched, they found some odd circuits that didn't quite fit any particular need. And the question was, what were they doing? How were these circuits operating? How were these gateways, etc.? What was going on there? And so the decision was to change supplier. That was the only thing they could do. So you quite rightly point out, when we take a machine into our hands, you have all of these hardware pieces, software pieces, security layers on top of that, end user applications, apps, whatever. But at any level, there can be a risk unknown to you. And that's where the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. So in closing, back in 2022, you published your cybersecurity vision for Ireland. And that part of that was basically turning Ireland into a global cyber hub for all intents and purposes. So if you and I had to sit down and draft Vision 2.0, looking at 2035, what would your focus shift be potentially to have a secure, sovereign Ireland?
I think the shift is in when we start talking about cyber and artificial intelligence. In 2022, we weren't talking about artificial intelligence. It was something off out there. But the problem is that things move so quickly now. I remember when we landed men on the moon, my father was telling me how he found that very amusing when he was a child, born in 1905, that someday we'd be on the moon. Well, less than 70 odd years later, we were on the moon. And when we were talking about artificial intelligence in 2022, it was a bit of a distance out there.
Yes.
Artificial intelligence is here today. Interestingly enough, some of the larger organizations in the country cut their intake of graduates by 25% this year because artificial intelligence will fill that gap. So what have we got to do? We've got to re-educate ourselves. Those 25% of graduates that didn't get a job with the big 5 or big 6 this year, we have to find another focus for them. And artificial intelligence is not something we should be afraid of. We should harness it. We should I'll give you an example. I'm quite deaf, and I had some difficulty at a conference recently, and I looked at new hearing aids, and the new hearing aids have an artificial intelligence chip in them. And it is unbelievable that you can be sitting. I was at dinner in Galway wearing these as a trial. And ordinarily at that dinner, I would pick one individual to sit beside me and talk to that individual for the night. And suddenly I found myself sitting at a table with 12 people, able to engage with all of them. And that's what artificial intelligence can do. We also use it, being honest, to write our speeches. It's very good at that. The only thing I'll say is you can't trust it fully yet.
Exactly. But the hallucinations are real.
but yeah, I think if we're going forward, it is only 4 years. If we're going forward now, we've got to harness artificial intelligence and have an eye to what's coming forward from there. Cybersecurity, unfortunately, lies at the base of all of this. So we got to be cyber aware all the time. That means we got to be AI aware, and we got to see how AI can be manipulated by bad actors. But we also have to embrace it and say this is good, and let's use it to the best of our ability. But be careful of the bad actors.
And one final word. If you could write one cyber law tomorrow that would take immediate effect, what would it be?
That anybody taking a cyber qualification would have it certified.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.